Hello everyone, thanks for joining us for another edition of Texas Insider TV. I'm Jim Cardle, a former Bexar County Commissioner, former Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and now as Chairman of the House Science and Technology Committee. Lamar Smith says that technology and innovation are what drives the American economy. We're pleased to visit with Lamar Smith today. Congressman, thanks for joining us.
Jim, always good to be with you and your viewers as well.
I should say, first of all, you're in a new Congress. You have transitioned off the Committee of Judiciary and now Chairman of Science and Technology, which we will get to in a minute.
Okay.
But first, if I can, going back to your House Judiciary Committee work, you oversaw the border, immigration, gun control issues, and gun control with the recent shootings across America and with the Obama administration's proposals front and center, I think, on your plate. Give us an update of what the outlook is and how you and your peers are reacting to it.
Absolutely, and even though I'm the new chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee, I'm still a member of the Judiciary Committee, which has jurisdiction over all gun control legislation whatsoever. And the disappointment to me, Jim, is that so many people seem to be using for instance, the incredible tragedy in Connecticut, the killings of 20 children, almost for their own political purposes. There is no connection between the gun control measures that have been either proposed or introduced and using those measures in any way to stop any of the violence that's occurred. Not a single one of those provisions would have prevented the tragedy in Connecticut, for example, or the tragedy in the movie theater in Colorado, or any of the others. So people are using this tragedy for political reasons, which I'm disappointed about. It is my feeling that the House is not going to pass any gun control legislation. I can't imagine it getting through the Judiciary Committee that I sit on. Years ago, they tried to get some gun control legislation through that committee, and on the basis of my questions, I was able to show that they would outlaw most of the deer rifles in America, and they pulled the legislation, and I got an NRA award for that, by the way.
Congratulations and good work on that effort.
But they just, not only do they not have the votes for any significant gun control legislation in the House, I'm not even sure they have the votes in the Senate. Even though the Democrats control the Senate and Democrats seem more inclined towards gun control than Republicans, there are 8 senators from conservative states, 8 Democratic senators from conservative states who are up for re-election in this coming election, and I'm not sure they're going to vote for gun control legislation either. What we ought to be talking about is what would make a difference, whether it's more treatment of those with mental illnesses, or whether it's somehow trying to persuade young people not to watch violent videos for so many hours every day. Most of those last half dozen mass killings had only one common denominator, and it was each of those killers watched 2 or 3 hours of violent videos every single day. So why don't we start there and have some kind of parental controls and make sure that if you're under 18, for example, you can't buy certain violent videos. We do that with movies. You can't go watch a movie unless you're over a certain age. Maybe we ought to say you can't buy a video. Now, we can't censor the videos. That would be unconstitutional against First Amendment.
But it is certainly more acceptable today compared to even 10 or 20 years ago for counseling, for treatment centers, for convicted criminals, for that type of thing, I think is what you're getting at.
Right, exactly.
And let me go back, if I can, and I was going to ask you about the Senate, which you mentioned. It appears that given the election outlook for the Senate, where they don't want their senators on record, it's pure positioning and political posturing. Do you see any backlash, or is that in the Senate whittling away at Harry Reid's credibility on the issue, perhaps?
Yep. I think that Harry Reid, the Senate Majority Leader, is going to be very hesitant to bring up any significant gun control legislation because he's going to be trying to protect the re-election prospects of some of his Democratic senators. But we'll see what they produce. Dianne Feinstein, a senator from California, has introduced a bill, bans certain kind of magazines, bans 150 guns by name, I think, bans the so-called assault weapons, which operate no differently than a lot of other sporting rifles. They just look different. They're cosmetic differences. There's no operational differences. And by the way, I think I'm about right in this. Rifles are relatively seldom used in mass killings. It's often the handguns that are used.
Okay.
And yet all this legislation is targeted at assault rifles simply because they look bad, but it's not based upon any correlation or connection whatsoever.
And it preaches well. It's marketing.
Yes.
We'll have you back on the gun issue as it proceeds. and talk more about that. But respectful of your time, we're visiting with Congressman Lamar Smith from San Antonio, Chairman of the House Science and Technology Committee, which, if I can, let's move to real quick because, as I mentioned, you've said that innovation is a key technology that we ought, or a key effort for our economy. We ought to be shooting for the stars. Certainly a accurate goal, I think, based on where we are with the shuttle grounded. But you're starting a new Congress. Tell us a little bit about what you're foreseeing to do here in the next 6 months even.
This is a wonderful committee assignment, science, space, and technology. I mean, this is about the future. In the case of scientific discoveries, what could be better for America, for American productivity, for generating jobs. Space inspires us all. We have jurisdiction over NASA, which of course is going to be of help to Texas and Houston, Johnson Space Center and so forth. Technology aspect of this committee, obviously of interest to individuals in Austin and these environments. Every city, everybody has an interest in technology because that is our future, and that is going to lead to economic growth. So we're going to be doing a lot with that. This committee oversees agency budgets totaling about $39 billion, much of which is research and development money. And that's where we want to target this research and development money for the most good for the most people. And I
believe, if I'm correct in what I've studied, it's all non-defense, essentially research and...
Right.
Okay.
And that gets us into a lot of good areas. Energy, particularly research and development. There you can see what research and development did. It led to the fracking process that is now such an economic boost to South Texas that is spreading everywhere.
It's changing our lives, literally.
No matter where you live, that's changing your life. Either you're going to benefit from the economic growth locally, or you're going to enjoy cheaper gasoline in the future and energy. So that has incredible spin-offs as well.
How about, if I may, the EPA? A lot of folks would not realize that the Science and Tech Committee has oversight of EPA, but yet it's a constant, and has been here in Texas, burr under our saddle. Any plans yet there?
Environmental Protection Agency has overstepped. They've been knocked back a couple times recently in federal court, as is the case. This administration implemented 40% more regulations than President Bush did. 80% of those are EPA regulations. And so you have individuals issuing regulations that stifle small businesses, stifle the private sector. They're being issued by people who probably never worked in the private sector in their life. So we're going to do a lot of hearings on trying to rein in unnecessary regulations. At a very minimum, the administration should tell the American people what the regulations are going to cost before they impose them. If there are a number of ways to achieve a legitimate goal, they ought to pick the least expensive way of doing it. So far, we haven't gotten them to even agree to those kind of common sense solutions.
Would the Keystone Pipeline be part of that discussion?
Keystone,
or not?
Well, yes, it is, and indirectly at least. But Keystone Pipeline has now got Nebraska to sign off environmentally and say there's not going to be any damage. So right now, the holdup is 100% the administration. We're talking about a pipeline from Canada to our refineries in Houston. Talk about shovel-ready jobs, 20,000 jobs in the next 12 months on the Keystone Pipeline. The only holdup is the administration, and I hope they will sign off, yes.
One final question. We've got about a minute left. Congressman Lamar Smith, and that has to do, it's not in the news necessarily right now, but 1 month after a budget agreement, we know there's something coming down the pike in March. Quick outlook.
We've got automatic cuts that go into effect March 1st if we don't take any other action. It looks like those cuts might go through. I'm in favor of cuts. I think defense would be cut too much. But we'll have to wait and see what happens there. The real problem is that the Senate has not passed a budget in 3 years, this being the 4th year. And so they're not even willing to tell the American people how they're going to spend their money. The House passes a budget every year, and the Senate, we're forced to pass a budget now. And American people are going to see different directions for the country. Democrats are going to propose increasing taxes, increasing spending. Republicans are going to propose the exact opposite, and then we're going to have a national debate, and we'll see what happens in the next month.
Well, indeed we will, and I'm sure it'll be interesting, hopefully not too much frustrating.
Yes.
We appreciate your work on behalf of Texas.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for coming in, Congressman Lamar Smith. Folks, we appreciate you joining us for this edition of Texas Insider TV, brought to you by SpeedStream. Remember, you're either an insider or you're not. I'm Jim Cardle.